Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hook Turn podcast. So, Sandvib, how are you tonight? Feeling cold?
No, I'm feeling pretty good. And today we've got some interesting cars, as well as a car sales challenge after quite a while. And both cars we're going to talk about are German, so no Chinese cars today.
Hmm.
New German SUVs, but on the opposite ends of the pricing scale, or
And
even
size.
considering of the German SUV pricing scale.
Yeah.
And yes, our car sales challenge is quite relevant as well today, so I'm keen to talk about that.
I'm interested to hear why it's quite relevant. But anyway, we'll talk we'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later. But let's get started. So, I think one of the most significant cars that has come out this week, especially in the context of the US market, is the new Audi Q9. So this is essentially Audi's flagship model now. It's basically an indirect successor to the Audi A8. So while the A8 was a sedan, the Q9 is just a basically, I mean, it's essentially Audi's version of a Yank tank. It's huge. It sits above the Q7, and I think it's especially going to be popular in the US market where they love those sort of their big SUVs and their big luxury SUVs. And you have models like from Cadillac and Lincoln and a lot of other brands as well. Anyway, so um, in terms of the actual dimensions, so just for context, it's 5.3 meters long, which is, that's a very long. I think, and I think for, you know, just to put this in uh, relative sizing, like something like a Volkswagen Golf, which you would consider like like a small hatchback, uh, in Australia is maybe like 4.2, 4.3 meters long. So this is almost like, I mean, that's a very random comparison to make, but it just shows you how big cars are getting these days. And I think in the US you can get like Cadillac Escalades and so on that are closer to the 6 meter mark. So still it's huge, but it's still shorter than some of its US competitors, and but it is actually longer than a long wheelbase Range Rover. So yeah, very big. In terms of direct competitors, this is something competing with the BMW X7 and the Mercedes-Benz GLS. So those are probably the direct rivals. And I think we might just talk a little bit about the powertrains before touching on the design. So powertrains in Europe, you'll get a, two diesel engines from launch. So that's a 180 kilowatt diesel and a 220 kilowatt diesel, 3 liter V6. And then there's also in the US, sorry, in Europe, that those are the options in Europe. And in the US, you or in North America, you get a 2.9 liter twin turbo petrol V6 with 315 kilowatts. So I believe that's probably similar to the powertrains that are used in like the Audi S5 and so on. Um, there is also an SQ9, which is the performance model, and that will be getting a 4 liter twin turbo V8, producing 440 kilowatts of power and 800 Newton meters of torque. So, yeah, that's really, decent. I mean, decent if limited range of powertrains. Nothing super surprising there. In terms of the design, Sanviv, did you want to touch a little bit on the design? Like, it's not that different, I would say, from the Q7, except for maybe the gigantic front grille. But what are your thoughts?
I think the front, I mean, it looks imposing, I guess, for the target market. It
Yeah,
kind of works. I think the rear looks quite awkward. I don't
yeah,
know why. It looks like it's almost incomplete.
yeah,
Like it's like as if it's left unfinished. So
yeah.
the
I think that's
yeah,
because they put so I'm just having a look at the rear and they put the where you'd put the registration plate, like the reg plate in the lower bumper rather than in the tailgate just below the light bar. I think that might be why, because it looks a bit weird to have that license plate right at the bottom of the car. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you, Sanviv.
otherwise, I mean, yeah, at this point, these cars, they all like especially at this price range, are trying to look as imposing as possible because that's obviously what their target market wants. And I guess if that's what they're going for, then they've achieved that. But it doesn't really look like an Audi anymore, almost. Like, yes, the rear and I guess the front has some small Audi elements, but that very distinct Audi look has like significantly been trimmed back, I
mm,
think, compared to like what they used to look like before.
mm,
Um, but obviously, apparently, they've suggested that they want it to look like have a lot of presence, unapologetically high status.
mm.
Everything illuminates, massive wheels. So it's the sort of car that, from a distance, someone's going to notice it, and they'll be like, "Wow, that person obviously has a lot of money," basically, which I guess is kind of what they want. Um, your apparently the rear lights are the world's first curved OLED tail lights.
Mm,
Um, they can display different, there are 512 individually controlled segments which can display different lighting signatures and communicate safety information. For example, warning approaching traffic when a door is being opened.
mm,
So interesting technology that they're doing. On top of that, obviously, even in terms of lighting, it's all about lighting in the car. The roof has
mm,
84 LEDs that, that it can illuminate, and you can change it between 30 different colors. So you're basically talking about like it's pretty clear that, and also on top of that, the headlights can project arrows on the ground,
mm,
so telling people that, hey, it's going to turn left or right. Um, so basically, it's quite clear in terms of lights, Audi is doing a lot. I believe, to be fair, it makes sense. I believe the Audi R8 was the first car with LED lights.
yeah.
So it makes sense that Audi's always sort of innovated with the way lights work in a car. Interior wise, look, we've spoken about these interiors before, heavily touchscreen. I'm sure in terms of interior quality, the material quality, sorry, is quite good, but really in terms of photos, they really do not look distinct anymore. It's just how many touchscreens do you want? And yeah, and the passenger also gets a touchscreen now. That's the new feature. Otherwise, there isn't as much to say in terms of the interior. Um, so everything is controlled by either touchscreen or by voice command. So we're talking, yeah, we're talking it, while the roof does actually sound quite cool, I would add, oh, so also it's got augmented reality head-up display. Again, that's not that new either. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I think I want to talk a little bit more and putting this car in context with where Audi is expected to go over the next couple of years. So they've this interior design, which they call in their marketing lingo the digital stage. They've essentially used the same philosophy in the new Q3, the new Q5, and also the A5 and the A6 and the Q7. So this is like the current generation of Audi interiors, and especially in the A5 and A6, it's been criticized quite a bit because it's lost all of that distinctive, Audi haptic feedback and the craftsmanship with the physical controls and everything. And they've just like, put this curved display and then awkwardly place this passenger display in front of the front passenger as well. It doesn't really flow. And it's just like lots of gloss back black plastic, like, and you can see that even though in this Q9 and the Q7 as well, they've gotten rid of the piano black trim on the center console. It's still there in terms of the massive bezels that the infotainment display has. So they're they've kind of like, rolled the dice on this current design concept and hasn't really had a hit with customers. So in my view, this is sort of like the last iteration of this sort of design philosophy. We've previously seen Audi already signify what's happening in its next generation design with the Concept C and in a production format with the Nuvolari, which is something we touched on in an earlier episode. And that is a whole scale departure from this current design philosophy, both in the exterior and the interior, but particularly in the interior. And that's much more of a focus on, okay, let's go away from this curved display and front passenger display. Let's put the focus back on the authentic materials, the real metal trim, physical controls for the air conditioning, fabrics, authentic, and on the outside have that authentic Bauhaus design. Don't have this huge gaping maws of a grill that's like this unnecessarily wide Audi single frame grill, and just have something a little bit more subtle. So I think that's the phase that Audi is going to from next year. Like we'll see the Audi A2 come out probably towards the end of this year and go on sale next year. That will have elements of that design philosophy, but my understanding is that it was went into development too late for sort of it to be changed to fully adopt this radical simplicity design philosophy that Audi has sort of envisioned with the Concept C and the Nuvolari supercar. But I think the all new or the next generation Audi A4, which they've confirmed is coming and will be electric, but will sort of come out in 2020 and or towards the mid to late 2027, probably on sale 2028, and the production version of the Concept C, which will be a much more niche car. But those two models will be the true next generation Audis. And I, for one, am really excited by those cars because they seem to me to be going back to what Audi really is all about, which is that pure sort of Bauhaus design, authentic quality. There's real Audi click materials, and high quality craftsmanship that they used to have. And this sort of digital stage BS. It's a bit of a hiccup in my opinion. So yeah, I thought I'd set the stage there. So I'm less excited about this car, but I'm more excited where Audi is going in the next 2 years. So did you have any thoughts on that?
I think that it's interesting that Audi, it kind of makes sense that Audi has now decided to kill the A8 in favor of this because the reality is that sedans, while the luxury sedans are now probably a much smaller market than what they used to be,
Yeah.
yes, the BMW still offer the 7 Series and Mercedes still have the S Class, but I suspect Audi felt like their chances of being having a relatively successful car was going to be a bit better with the SUV. And the other thing is that they haven't chosen to electrify it because showing how they're sort of understanding the fact that, especially for a car that's targeted for America, electric cars are not really what they are looking for right now.
Mm,
Otherwise, you're again, I'm looking forward to this lighting technology eventually in however many years' time rolling down to regular cars, just like how when LED lights first debuted on the R8 and now they're standard on every car that's ever built.
mm.
This sort of lighting technology will be great to have on mainstream cars in hopefully 5 years' time or so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Audi seems to be like the main sort of premium brand that is going with OLED lighting technology. Like there's other brands that are doing, like Matrix lighting, which has been on the market for a while, and then you have Pixel LED, Pixel Matrix, and I think Mercedes is doing digital lighting, which uses micro LEDs to achieve like a similar effect with projecting signs on the road and so on. But yeah, I guess good on Audi for doing what they can with OLED lighting technology, especially on the taillights. Um, okay, look, I think should we move on to the next topic?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Now, from the top end of the premium SUV segment to the entry level, we've had another reveal from a fellow competing German brand, which is the new Mercedes GLA. So the GLA is Mercedes' entry level SUV. Um, and this particular model will be available both as a petrol and it's like sort of like a petrol mild hybrid model as well as an electric model. So the version that was revealed um, this week was the electric one. So that has, I think it's available in two specifications. You can get the 250 plus electric and the 350 electric. The 250 plus is 200 kilowatts of power, 335 newton meters of torque, 85 kilowatt hour usable battery, and an estimated WLTP range of between 577 to 657 kilometers, which is pretty good for this size of car, actually. Then the 350, which is the more powerful dual motor all drive version, has a similar 85 kilowatt hour NMC battery, but gets 555 to 643 kilometers of range on the WLTP cycle. So that's pretty fairly comparable, which is pretty good, despite the having dual motors and so on. Uses an 800-volt architecture, so that's good, and can fast charge it up to 320 kilowatts. So that's very good charging speeds and so on. Sandeep, did you have any initial thoughts on where they might price this in the Australian market, or your initial thoughts on the design as well?
Well, I was going to say the design is interesting. It's not bad. And it looks mostly inoffensive. I think it's one of the designs that at night it will look quite good. We'll talk about why, but similar to basically Audi with its lights, it's pretty clear. Um, Mercedes are also experimenting with lights and especially having the star motif in all of their lights. So it's got a star in their headlights, it's got a star even in their rear tail lights. There's one obviously on the grille, the logo itself, and also in the panoramic roof.
Yeah.
So apparently the grille contains 608 LEDs. I was going to say that imagine even getting into a small accident in one of these, just a light
Yeah.
like accidentally driving into the a light rear end.
Yeah.
Like
Right
what could
off.
have been like a 1 second fix by a smash repairer is now
Yeah.
going to take like months to
Yeah.
try and replace 608 LEDs. Like I wonder if people think about that when they buy these sorts of cars. Like I cannot imagine
Yeah.
how stressful that would
I
be.
think you'd have to replace the entire like grill assembly, and I don't know how they'd do it, but I assume you could get a entirely new grill with all of the LEDs and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's similarly to the Audi, it's got a panoramic roof that also does the 172 illuminated stars. It can go between transparent and opaque very quickly. Um, like it seems like the panoramic roof, like originally the panoramic roof simply being able to see the sky, as in the actual sky, was like the cool feature. Now it's like you got to have stars and it
Yeah,
always lights up. Like
lighting.
yeah, like ambient lighting is cool. But I don't like how many people look like I have my current car has a panoramic roof, my previous car has a panoramic roof, and as the driver, you literally never look at it.
Yeah.
So it's really a feature for the passengers, like, oh wow, look, and really only children as well who are sitting in the back seats would be like entertained by it. But I don't think too many people who are buying the GLA are looking at it for a family car. So I'm curious to see what the point is. But I will say though that interestingly enough, the entry level GLA electric is going to be. I'll be curious to see first whether they even sell it in Australia. Wouldn't be surprised if they started just at the GLA 250 plus, simply because the GLA 200, um, it would be not. Its range is not competitive enough with
Mm,
anything, any car. Yet they can't price it in the 50s or 60s, where it should be priced.
mm,
So I would probably start it off the GLA 250 plus, at least then they can advertise something reasonably powerful and with quite a large range that they can semi-justify a 70, $80,000 price for it. Whereas the entry level, its range is simply too short. Like unless if they could price it at 60 something thousand, then we'd be saying something. But yeah, I'll be curious. I mean, I guess like if they want to get some more sales in Australia, I mean, that's what they'd have to do because in Europe they don't have to worry about the Chinese competition. In Australia, they do. Um, I this car. The other thing that's interesting is that the market for this because it's an electric car, which already limits in some ways the market. But oh wait, to be fair, no, no, it's not fully electric. It does have the petrol hybrid option, so I should say that. Yeah, so it does have a petrol hybrid option, and I guess if you're interested
Hasn't been
in that,
revealed yet, but it should be coming out shortly, I believe.
yeah, yeah. But it is clear that the electric version is the main thing. But for 70 something thousand, like before, when these luxury SUVs from like the original GLA and similar like the X1 and the Q2,
Yep.
when when they were first sort of came out in the mid 2010s or so and priced in the 50, $60,000 price bracket, they kind of made sense. It was like like you get the Mercedes or the BMW or the Audi badge in a SUV format for a reasonable price. But now that they're creeping up towards 70, $80,000 just to get into one, their value equation kind of changes, especially now thanks to the emergence of Chinese cars, where for the same price you'll get like something far, far nicer and like with way more
Bigger as well.
features.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be curious to see where the value comes. And also, let's face it, back in the day, they actually came with nicer interiors and like unique things that couldn't be given by mainstream brands. Now, they all give you massive touchscreens. So looking at the interior of the GLA, it's also the same. And unlike the Q9 we just spoke about,
Yeah.
I suspect that its actual material quality wouldn't be too different from a top-end Chinese car either. Like I doubt. In fact, it could be worse even. Who knows?
Yeah.
So yeah, again in Europe, these cars make sense where Chinese cars attract so much tariffs that they are not quite competitive. But in Australia, I it will be curious to see what they do with these cars.
Yeah. I think just to clarify, I did forget to mention at the start that there is and this is something that Sandbib touched on, there is an entry level electric model as well. So that's a 200 electric, and the range for that one is 394 to 447 kilometers on the WLTP cycle. So yeah, it's not it's sort of vaguely comparable to the entry level Tesla Model Y, I think, which also gets around 450 kilometers on the WLTP cycle. But yeah, I think Samuel, I tend to agree with you. Mercedes, their design philosophy of late, especially in the interior, has also been just screens, screens, and more screens. And the interior is nothing different from what we saw with the CLA, which has also been revealed what was the end of last year and is on sale. But I actually think the styling of this is better than the CLA because it doesn't have the monobrow that the CLA does at the front with that weird like light bar design. Like this is just more a little bit more conventional. So I personally like this design better than the CLA, which just looks a little bit awkward and like they've extruded the front of the car out too much with the CLA. But I think one thing to note with Mercedes, the newest generation of Mercedes EVs, so that includes this one, the GLA, and also the CLA, and the electric C class, and the what's the other one, the electric GLC as well, is that they all of them have like a big frunk. So that's so in the GLA, we have 107, I think it's 107 liter frunk, which is very big. Like compared to something like an iX3, for example, you get like 58 liters. And Volvo EX60, both of so these cars are sort of almost like two classes up. You're also around that 58 liter frunk space. And what's really good with that, it's not just the size. So the size is good because you can store something like a carry-on suitcase or like a big bag. So it's actually you can use it more for more than just storing like your charging cables and so on. But it's also just it's also interesting with how you access it. So in these Mercedes vehicles, you don't have to unlock the frunk from the inside. Like you don't have to. It's not like opening a bonnet where you have to pull a lever or something. You can just push down on Mercedes badge, and it will like it's almost like the badge acts as a button to lift up the frunk. So that's quite a handy solution, and it means that yeah, Mercedes really do want you to use the frunk as like an actual, almost like a second boot rather than just a random space to store charging cables that you take out when you need to charge the car. So I think they've done a really good job with some of the packaging there and being able to have such a large frunk like that can easily store, a carry-on suitcase, other practical things, and it's almost like a Tesla style, Tesla size frunk as well. Any further thoughts? And do you reckon this will be more expensive than the CLA or less expensive?
So the current one starts at $70,000, the current GLA. This will probably be at least 8 to 10 grand more than that. That's just if they bring that is if they bring the GLA 200 electric.
Yeah.
Will probably start at 80 something K if they bring that.
Mm,
Because if the current one, which is quite old, relatively speaking, for Mercedes technology is already at 70K, there's no way that a brand new one on Mercedes-Benz latest architecture will be anything less than 80K.
mm,
Um, and as I said earlier, that when these cars first came out, 10, 15 years ago, they started in the mid 50s, and at that
yeah.
price, they kind of made sense, as I said. But now, for 80 grand, which is effectively what this will be after all on roads, like anyone with any kind of like, I, why would you get something like this over a Zeekr 7X, for example, which is would be more powerful, just as luxurious, more practical? Like, at some point, they have to basically be like, it's not possible for them to compete with, and as I said, in some ways, probably more sophisticated than the GLA. So I think that again in Europe it makes sense, but the Chinese have just made it that in a country like Australia, these simply do not make sense anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, look, we might leave it there with the GLA and we might move on to our next topic, which is the car sales challenge. So, Samuel, did you want to talk a little bit more about which the context for this and why we've chosen this sort of price range?
So we were thinking if we were to go on a road trip on the North Coast 500 in the Scottish Highlands, what basically would we want to buy? And so that thought basically led us to thinking, okay, what would we want to buy? We'd have to like, we'd have to, for me personally, I was thinking if I was making a road trip like that, I'd want basically a nice car. So if I
Well, you
want a
have
nice
been on
car,
that sort of road trip, right? So a few years ago.
yeah. A few years ago, correct, I did. But I had an okay car, but it was an SUV, but really not the actual ideal car that I'd want. So I was like, okay, let's give ourselves normally, most of the time, we give ourselves a very low budget, as low as possible to make it interesting. This time I was like, we'll go the opposite end. Say if we had anywhere between 120 or 130 and 150 grand to spend on a car to drive the North Coast 500 in the Scottish Highlands, what would we take? So Vivek, why don't we start with your car?
Sure. So we're in the Scottish Highlands. This is a location where there's been a lot of filming with James Bond movies. So my approach was, look, at this price range, you can basically pretend to be James Bond if you're willing to go used. So I looked at what are the Aston Martins that you can get and what's the best one. And the one that I found it was a 2016 Aston Martin V8 Vantage MY16. So yes, it is 10 years old, but $142,000, has only done 32,000 kilometers, is in that lovely sort of light green, almost like a traditionally you would not call it a British racing green, but it is like a very light sort of shade of green color, which is what you want. Absolutely gorgeous design. It has that V8. That's really all. Has the badge. And yeah, you can pretend to be James Bond if you want to be. So I think the brand was a big factor in my decision, and Aston Martin is the perfect blend of performance and sportiness, and luxury. Like it's not as outright sporty as something like like a Porsche, but it's a little bit more on the luxurious side, but I think that's probably what you want on those. It's still very nimble and agile, and that's kind of what you want on the Scottish Highlands. And you can't beat the badge. Like Aston Martin in Scotland, that's pretty much a match made in heaven, so to speak. So yeah, I want to live out my Skyfall memories, and James Bond drove a classic DB5 in that one, but let's do a little bit more of a modern take
Well,
on.
also the DB5 would not be under $150,000.
No, it would be
So
maybe $500,000 as a classic.
yes, so it wouldn't quite fit. But yes, the closest thing. For
Mm,
me, I was thinking initially a British car, but then I thought, well, I wasn't thinking Aston. Maybe I should have, but then I guess you got that idea as well.
mm,
So I decided just a more classic car. I was like, okay, would want a two-seater convertible. It's a very narrow, winding roads. Um, uh, would be quite windy, so often you wouldn't have the roof down unless if you went during summer. But it would be cool to have the option.
mm,
So I was like, all right, under $150,000, two-seat convertible. I'm someone who would want, and especially in those roads, you can go, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes without seeing another car. So I was like, okay, I don't want something old that could be potentially a bit unsafe and you'd still want things like proper GPS and stuff. So I was like, I want something relatively new. So then I was like, and reliable as well. The last thing you'd want is for the car to break down. So that made me settle on a Porsche. So I found a Porsche certified 2024 718 Boxster for 145,900 drive away. So that's inclusive of on roads. Porsche certified obviously means that it's been checked by Porsche, so it should be great in terms of value. You've got plenty of power in terms of the car itself. Um, not a V8, yes, but still pretty good in terms of its powertrain. So yeah, and it's got a lot of the options as well. Its interior is surprisingly quite classic looking, even though it's a 2024 car. It has a relatively what you'd call old school interior. Only four cylinders, so again, compared to your
That's why it's so
V8,
cheap, Sandvin, because it's still a four-cylinder, not even a V6, not a,
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
the, not the not I shouldn't say V6, not the Porsche's iconic flat
yeah, yeah.
gas.
It's a four-cylinder turbo. I
Yeah,
mean, it's still plenty quick, 4.90 to 100. So we're not
glorified
talking.
Porsche GDI, Sandvin.
So it is still plenty quick, but yes, it is. It may and it's rear-wheel drive as well, which
Yeah,
is nice. And yeah, so I'm sure it'd be absolutely incredible to drive. Um, and yeah, I know it'd be reliable because it's relatively new. It'd have things like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, have most modern safety tech. Again, it's a convertible, so if needed, I could use it. You have the roof off or the roof on, and yeah, and it'll be nimble because the roads in the Scottish Highlands are very narrow. Because initially I was thinking of something like a bigger M3, but then I realized that car's a bit too big. So I was
mm,
like, I want something more nimble and smaller, basically, for roads like the Scottish Highlands, which are all single lane actually. So you wouldn't want like a big car.
mm.
A smaller car would give you a bit more confidence to take it at higher speed compared to a bigger car. We might worry about obviously going off road or something. And yeah, I thought this was great. Porsche is obviously going to drive fantastically. It's a very new car, so
Yeah,
no issues there. Mine has only done 13,000 kilometers as well. So, and it's automatic, so relatively easy to drive. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's not a bad choice. I was just curious, did you look at the Jaguar F-Type at all out of
I
curiosity?
didn't. I guess that could have been a good choice as well. I
Yeah.
guess I was just taken. I feel Porsche is a bit more special than Jaguar. And yes, even though it's the Scottish Highlands, if you're going to take a British car, you've actually taken the only one that would make sense. Jaguar doesn't have anything that specific to do with the Scottish Highlands. At least Aston Martin does.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay, yeah, it's definitely the one you've picked. I mean, yeah, the powertrain is probably a big factor why it's 100 under 150 grand, but but apart from that, the condition looks fantastic. I like the wheels. I'm just having a look at the screenshot here. Nice, nice color, convertible. You get that wind in your hair feeling. But yeah, I think, yeah, I just like the V8 of the Aston Martin. Yeah, just gotta go for that one. All right. Look, I think we might end it there for this week's episode of the Hook 10 podcast. So thank you very much for listening. And please remember to like and subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the major podcasting platforms. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye.